All right, here we are, hour number 2 on a Buffalo Victory Monday. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, One Bills Live. Thanks for joining us. And joining us now is Bills radio color analyst, former center for the Bills, and host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast. It's Eric Wood joining us after yesterday's resounding and convincing 31-10 win over the Seahawks. And Eric, look, the Seahawks gave him a couple of extra added opportunities due to some colossal miscues, but you can't blame the Bills for that. They took advantage of them and made the game a lot more lopsided than maybe we thought it should have been.
Yeah, there was some goofy plays in that one. You had the snap over Geno Smith's head. They stepped on him on the goal line, which cost them any points on that series. And, they made enough mistakes, but, the Bills didn't play a completely clean game, especially when you look at the the Bills did have the one turnover with the Josh Allen interception, but with all of the penalties, some special teams decisions, which hurt some field position. I mean, it wasn't like the Bills didn't, shoot themselves in the foot at times as well, but this was a dominating Bills win and a tough place to play. These NFC teams where you don't play them that often, it just seems like this Bills team, and Josh Allen in particular, dominates those opponents. I assume that means that the Bills and their unique quarterback play and everything they do becomes tougher for teams that only get to face them generally one every 4 years than the reverse side of things and the Bills preparing for these NFC teams.
Yeah, and while it wasn't really clean for Buffalo, you could sense a difference in the way they played, at least offensively, right? I mean, they come out and they throw it on first down, under center quite a bit, and the emergence of Keon Coleman as, finger quotes, an attitude guy, right? He's kind of a grit guy. All of a sudden, he's setting a bully kind of mindset to the offense that we haven't seen before. I mean, you can tell he's a much more confident young player than he was just 2 weeks ago.
I'm not sure if something was said to him in the pregame or if he read something throughout the week. Whatever it is, they need to find that and show him to it, or find someone on the other team to get him all ticked off, because that is an attitude we haven't seen out of him this year. Now, some of that may just be it's his 8th game as a pro and he's growing into who he's going to be as a player. But, you make a statement with some of those blocks he made out there. I mean, much less the production he had through the air, catching a touchdown against a really good corner in Reek Woolen. And, you make a number of other plays, but those blocks he made out there, I mean, Deion Dawkins said he was going to keep his cleats and have Keon Coleman autograph him. Deion credits me with some of his stuff in his game now, or maybe some of his locker room stuff, but I never did that to one of our receivers. Maybe I would have done it for maybe a Robert Woods or someone. That's probably who I played with that had the most attitude on the outside, but I loved what I saw from Keon these last couple weeks. It just seems to be growing into the player that we all hoped he would become this season. And, it's going to take some time generally as a rookie, and it did. And now we've seen him play excellent these last couple weeks. And whether you can say that's maybe Amari Cooper taking some attention away from him, maybe he's learned a little bit from him, or he's just growing into his game, I'm loving what I'm seeing from him out there.
Yeah, and just to expand on Steve's point, the Bills go into this game as the number 1 run rate team in the league on 1st and 10, 65% of the time running on 1st and 10. And in the first half on 1st and 10, Joe Brady calls 5 runs, 9 passes. Some of those of the play action variety. Just maybe speak to Joe Brady using some tendency breakers to really get this offense in gear early.
Yeah, and I'll give you credit, Chris, for your interview with Bobby Babich on the pregame for the radio yesterday, and him talking about this becomes part of the season where when you have those tendencies that have mounted up, okay, now can we go back and look at those and use them against other teams? The Bills start this game off on the play for those watching along with us right now with a shot play to Dawson Knox across the field. We've seen them be so conservative throughout this season, early in games, generally running the football on first down. Okay, let's try and move the sticks. Let's set up a 3rd and manageable, a 3rd and short. Well, they came out firing in this game, especially on first down. So whether that was them noticing their tendencies, and then What I will say, though, is McDermott talked about it after the game, and other players kept reiterating it. We wanted to start faster. We wanted to start faster. We needed to start faster on the defense side of the ball. We needed to put up points early. We can't get off to a slow start. Well, when all the emphasis is on that, I believe Joe Brady said, okay, well, we want to put up points early. I'm going to dial up a few more shots early in this one. And then defensively, they came out with their hair on fire. Greg Rousseau bats 2 out of the first 3 balls of the game. Some of that's fortunate timing, but you think of some of the plays that the corners made on the outside when Kenneth Walker tried to bounce it. Taron Johnson makes an awesome play in space. This defense came out strong. They forced 2 3-and-outs the first 2 series of the game, and that was one of my keys to the game this week was you go out to Seattle, if you're able to start fast, you can take that crowd out of the game. This is not the crowd that was behind the Super Bowl Legion of Boom teams. They haven't had the same success. This is not the same roster. This is a team that, prior to their last win in Atlanta, had lost 3 in a row, and, the fan base is reeling a little bit. And so they came out, started fast, and the crowd, while it remained a factor, they have the decibels listed in the stadium. I don't know that they got back up to that initial 106 or whatever they listed for the first snap of the game for the Bills for the remainder of it.
Let's talk about the early start, particularly defensively. The Seahawks get the ball right out of the gate, and 2 out of the first 3 plays, Greg Rousseau is right in Geno's face, right in his grill. From that point on, the Seahawks were forced to put somebody over there to help the right tackle. We knew the right tackle was inexperienced. It was his second start, and you thought maybe Rousseau would have a day. But, man, oh, man, right out of the gate, they said, listen, we're not doing it. They started chipping. They started double-teaming. They allocated assets to Greg Rousseau for the rest of the game. And that hamstrung their ability to use those guys in a different way for the rest of the game. And that started from his first series, batting a couple of passes right back in Geno's face.
Yeah, to your point, Steve, I'll also give the Bills credit for, and whether this is coaching or the players just making adjustments, Seattle tried to come out and do the same things to the Bills that have given them fits. The first play of the game, they run a play-action rollout. How many times have you seen the teams early in the game, they run that play-action rollout. The defensive end does exactly what he's coached to do, and that's to play the run and then adjust to the pass on early downs. Well, Greg Rousseau goes straight up the field, so whether that was coaching and understanding, okay, this is how teams are attacking us early in games, or that's simply him making a play, give him credit there. The second play, they get the running back in space in the flat. Bills coming into this game have given up the most receiving yards to running backs in the NFL. Well, Taron Johnson makes a nice play in the flat to force the 3rd and long. And then instead of playing vanilla defense on 3rd down, they bring a pressure, which allows Greg Rousseau to be one-on-one, and he gets his hand up and bats the ball down. And so, to me, that's growth from the defense and not simply letting the same screens, play-action rollouts, dink and dunk passes, and then occasional run plays. You don't let that, control the game early on like we even saw a week prior against Tennessee. So I give the defense a lot of credit in not waiting until the second half or waiting until a team put up 10 points before they say, okay, we're going to take this stuff away. They simply took it away from the jump, understanding that, hey, these have been our tendencies. This is what teams have done to attack us. This is what worked. Okay, let's take it away early and then see what they can do. And it wasn't a whole lot.
James Cook probably had the quietest 1,500-yard total yard from scrimmage season in the league last year. Got virtually no recognition for it. I mean, he did go to the Pro Bowl, but still. I mean, over 1,500 yards at the end of the season. Nobody said anything. And here he is yesterday putting on a show. Probably his best game this season by far. And credit to the offensive line also. Eric, I don't know if you heard Deion Dawkins' locker room interview after the game, but he said in the huddle, Bills offensive lineman David Edwards was telling them on the run play where the hole was going to open up against this defense based on film study, and was kind of giving James Cook an advanced scouting report on how the play was going to open up. I have never heard that before. How often does this happen?
Probably not very often, except for the plays that are dictated to go in a specific gap. But most of the running schemes nowadays are either wide zone, mid zone, inside zone, where you can cut that back. Even your gap schemes where you have your duos where you don't have a puller, or your power schemes, which are also gap schemes, you're generally reading it inside out and then all the way backside, because if everyone's covered, the running back should be able to take it out the back door. And so there's generally a lot of room to read it. That's very interesting that he said that David Edwards was that in tune with it, and I like it. And some of that's based upon just understanding, okay, we're running mid-zone right at me. I know that this guy's going to expand. I can't reach him. The ball's got to go inside me. It's probably going back to that double team on the backside, whether that's Spencer Brown and Cyrus Torrance or Spencer Brown at a tight end. And I'd like to know if we went back and maybe Jay Harris and his staff back there can help us out. How many yards would Cook have had penalties on holding plays on his runs? It had to have been at least maybe another 20 yards. Now, that could have impacted how many yards they still had to go on a drive because he was often picking them back up himself. But, I mean, these holding calls in this game really took the Bills out of the rhythm on offense, or they could have just kept running these chunk runs followed by these explosive play-action passes.
Yeah, the first drive of the game, the 90-yard drive, it was actually a 110-yard drive because of the penalties right out of the gate. So they had that to deal with, and they did a masterful job of it. That's something I don't know that early in the season this team would have been able to overcome that quickly. But my question for you, Eric, and what's your thoughts on, no question, this was a really first game of the year that they went wire to wire, played good throughout on both sides of the ball. It kind of put together a full effort. It still feels like there's more in the tank, even though they played so well offensively. Their numbers were great. What's the next step now? I mean, certainly Amari Cooper didn't have, he was asked. He had like one catch in the day. Keon did his thing. Shakir's doing his thing. Kincaid, Knox. Everybody's getting a chance to contribute some, but what's the next step, and what can we look for this offense? What's the next step for the identity of this offense to emerge?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the next step is just doing it more consistently. And we saw against Tennessee a slow start, against Houston a slow start, against Baltimore. Well, against the Jets, they had a hot start, and they had a hot start yesterday scoring on the opening possession. And realistically, throughout a 17-game regular season, you're not going to score on the first drive of every game. But the 3-and-outs early in the game, how can we eliminate those on a week-to-week basis? And I don't know, you'd love to get more production from Amari Cooper yesterday, but when you have Keon and Shakir have the days that they have, the ball can only go around so far. Josh throws for over 280 yards. We're never going to complain about that production. So whether it's Keon one week or Amari one week or Shakir or a combination of 2 or 3 each and every week, tight end production, some production from the running backs in the pass game, that's great. That's great. Dispersion throughout. The run game was going yesterday. So can you remain balanced enough, but mixing in more first down passes like we saw yesterday, and then do it on a consistent basis throughout the season? And then what I'm sure Sean McDermott's harping on today are the pre-snap penalties. I mean, those drive him nuts. And and we've talked about this on One Bills Live before, and I'm assuming he coaches the same way as when I was there because he's the most consistent person I've ever met. After a win, especially a commanding win, he's going to find stuff to be really hard on. After a loss, especially a tough loss, he's going to find things that are encouraging from the game to give you confidence into the next week. He's assuming these guys have enough confidence heading into Miami next week. So he'll, I'm sure, get on this offense, especially the offensive line, about the pre-snap penalties and a few of the holding calls. I see where they happen. Those are probably 50-50 calls, and they called about 90% of them yesterday. It's the pre-snap penalties that, 8 games in, you don't expect to be such an issue.
All right, so let's talk about that a little bit more. You mentioned Miami's coming in here next week, and we were keeping tabs on it on the radio broadcast. Being a 4 o'clock game, East Coast time, a lot of the 1 o'clocks happened and fell very favorably for Buffalo, particularly in the division. Miami loses on a last-second field goal. The Jets lose after the Patriots go in and score a touchdown with 22 seconds left in regulation. And suddenly the division race really isn't much of a race at all right now. How would you look at it, being mindful that there are still 9 games to play? I mean, things look good, but maybe just give us your assessment here at the midway point.
Yeah, we also got some help outside the division when you look around the conference with the Browns beating the Bengals. The Browns beat the Ravens. The Bengals lose to the Eagles. We caught some other help out there as well when you look around the conference. And so, look, you got a commanding lead you simply got to take it one game at a time and take care of business. Obviously, you give up the losses to Baltimore and Houston, and you're worried about those coming back to haunt you when it comes to home games in the playoffs. But right now you're trying to get better each and every week. You're trying to take care of business and go 1-0 each week. And I know that's cliche, but the last thing you can do is say, man, we got this big lead in the division. We can kind of coast on out, and then we'll see what happens in the playoffs. They got to be licking their chops right now with some turmoil around the division, thinking, okay, we can rattle off some victories here, especially when you look at the 4 remaining division games. And then, hey, can we beat Kansas City? Can Kansas City drop a couple? And what's this playoff seeding going to look like? But it's just amazing. And I believe Chris calls it Bills myopia, but because we're all consumed with the Bills. But you're riding high early on, and everyone's praising you and Josh Allen's MVP, and then everyone wants to say, "Hey, we told you so." Those 3 teams stunk, and then you win a few games in a row again, and now everyone's praising you again, and kind of just shows you that as a team, and it's such a long season, you're going to have bad weeks where everyone's going to talk trash on you, and you respect the media in those instances. You don't do what the kid down in Dallas who has a familiar last name did yesterday. You treat everyone with respect and just understand that everyone's got a job, and the reason that we make so much money playing the game of football nowadays is partly due to the TV coverage, and so you respect them, but just understand that when you have bad weeks, everyone's going to tell you how bad you stink. Eventually, they'll likely tell you how good you are, and you got to stay focused throughout.
Yeah, and as this season progresses, I mean, this is always, and he's always in the conversation. Josh is just so good and so important, and he does so many things that no other quarterback does. This seems to be a very quiet year for his MVP talk, although when your team wins and wins a lot, your quarterback's always going to be in that conversation. And right now, Josh, as this team keeps grinding away, and probably what is his least spectacular year, he's going to stay in that conversation, is he not?
Yeah, he will. And I think his passing numbers, especially these last 2 weeks, are going to help, bolster that. And a lot of it's who ends up being that 1 seed. Looking at it, it's either Lamar or Patrick Mahomes right now. And Patrick Mahomes, he's got more interceptions than touchdowns on the season. If that was Josh Allen, they would just a lot of the talking heads out there would use that to kind of prove their pre-draft stock opinions on Josh correctly. But, he takes a lot of criticism, but our man's playing some really good ball right now. Got some new receivers, and everyone said this is going to be a down year, and this is a year that he's playing extremely efficient. And I've loved how Joe Brady – I actually had a conversation with Tom Brady about this before the game, about how Joe Brady's giving him some different answers, some easier throws, letting him settle in so he doesn't have to take as many risks down the field. And because of that, he's been extremely efficient.
Eric, thanks as always for the time. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you at the end of the week when you're up here for Bills at Miami at the Bills.
Yep, sounds good. Looking forward to it, guys.